It's the early 1960s and Britain is in the midst of a new obsession. Thousands are queuing on high streets up and down the country to take part in a growing craze.
Bingo!
It was a game that anyone could play and it was sweeping the nation. It made pulses race.
You get terribly excited
I get very excited, yeah.
Some people couldn't get enough.
I'm so excited I could do with a drink of whiskey.
What is it, £47?
£47, 2 shillings.
Bingo allowed somebody to come home with sort of £200 in the pocket, which would be unbelievable, because in those days, £200 was a lot of money.
The prizes were not just cash, the prizes were designed to be glamorous. So we had cruises in the Mediterranean, to Monte Carlo and Biarritz.
Whether they won or not, Bingo had the power to keep them coming back for more.
Did you win this afternoon?
I did, yes, twice.
Did you enjoy the session?
Very much, thank you.
Did you win?
Yes, 10 shillings.
The boom seemed to arrive out of nowhere, but it packed out cinemas and theatres across the land, much to the delight of a new breed of entrepreneur.
The bingo hall became the place. Cheap, easy, friendly, they felt they were somebody.
But not everyone was amused.
Well, we don't like these posters put all round our beautiful old theatre.
The attraction of the game bewildered some.
Wouldn't you rather be doing something else?
Such as?
And brought out class snobbery in others.
Bingo. The most mindless ritual achieved in 500,000 years of human evolution.
Few saw the explosion coming, not least the government, whose liberalising of the gaming laws had inadvertently created bingo mania. But it couldn't have come along at a better time. It brought communities together when they needed it most, and in its own small way, liberated the lives of many women. The 1960s had created the perfect storm for a bingo bonanza.
Eyes down, full house. Time for fun. 41.
It's one of the most popular pastimes in the UK. More people play than watch professional football. And bingo attendances are higher than those for any British church.
It's fantastic. Adrenaline rush. You know, are you filming me?
Well, when we get nearly a line, my heart starts going and you think, oh, come on, pull it out, you know, I'm really excited.
Oh, it's nervous, you're shaking, the adrenaline's going. Yeah, we've had that quite a bit tonight, haven't we?
Today the game is big business with billions at stake. But all this would have been unimaginable back at a time when gambling was illegal. And bingo was a simple number game more commonly known as housey-housey, lotto or tombola.
At the beginning, number 1.
It was a popular form of entertainment for the troops in the First and Second World Wars. And as it was illegal to play for money, the prizes were instead practical items like boot polish and hair cream.
Jack Tar indulges in the one gambling game permitted in the Navy, tombola.
It was a very easy form of entertainment. You didn't need to carry a lot of apparatus. You didn't need to carry a big clientele to operate it. The army could carry it in a briefcase. All the cards, they call it housey-housey or lotto, and the army could take it all over the world. And they played it on the desert, they played it in the jungle. It was something they could do anywhere. It took the mind of the person away from what was happening in the world. Because once you start playing bingo, you concentrate.
Eyes down for the full house. 2 ducks, 22.
It was in the forces where an important aspect of the game that we're all familiar with, whether we've played bingo or not, has its roots.
The calls initially came from the Army and the Navy.
All the 4s, droopy jaws.
But in those days, it was important to get some fun into it. So you didn't say number 9, you said doctor's orders, number 9.
Number 9 was the nickname of a laxative pill issued by the Royal Navy.
66, and it was 2 fat whacks. Well, a whack was a lady in the army, and there was often the jokes about them being very bonny in the uniforms, and so we'd say 2 fat whacks.
And so, yeah, the calls do reflect the rather coarse humour of groups of men cooped up together.
Lanes, 11.
I like 7 and 6.
Was she worth it? 7 and 6.
I've heard several versions of this one from various elderly gentlemen in various Royal Naval clubs and Royal British Legion clubs. So, 7 and 6, was she worth it? Some of them say it was the price of a marriage licence, and the callback, especially if your wife is next to you, is, of course she is, or look, she's still here, we're still together. So the people call back with that. That's so cool. Another explanation that I've heard was, well, if there's two of you going out, if you've picked up a nice girl to take out, then you want 2 and 6 for 2 cinema tickets, because they're 1 and 3 each. You want 2 and 6 for 2 nice fish and chip suppers, and 2 and 6 for bed and breakfast. I don't know how true that is, but I have had that one also told me several times.
This ingenuity and injection of humour helped make bingo so popular with the troops that the game quickly spread. First of all to the ex-servicemen's clubs, and then to the holiday camps that were springing up all over post-war Britain, where it became a staple alongside the knobbly knees competition and beauty contests.
One of the main entertainments at the holiday camps was tombola. Now, this is not a secondary or subsidiary activity. For example, marquees were put up that could hold 300 players, and then 2 sessions a day would run for 3 hours each. So we're not talking about something that was a minor part of a holiday camp holiday.
Hello everyone, this is Beryl, your radio Butlin announcer.
I did go to Pontins near Morecambe, and honestly it was just like a prisoner of war camp, really. Nobody around. Then somebody announced there'd be bingo in the hall in 5 minutes, and everybody debouches from their rooms to the hall.
If your idea of a good holiday is bingo from 10:30 in the morning until 10:30 at night, then Clacton is a dream come true. Every day, including Sundays, the faithful are called to play.
The companies, the holiday camp companies, couldn't profit from bingo. That was illegal. They weren't allowed to do that. So most of the proceeds had to go to charity. And Butlins alone was donating £50,000 a year from its tombola games to charity in the 1950s.
Bingo, bingo, I'm in love.
So it was very popular there. It was also popular at seaside resorts and in fairgrounds. We have some lovely accounts of some tombola games, bingo games, at travelling fairgrounds, where the prizes would be bargee pots or boxes that appeared to be chocolates, but when you actually got into them turned out to be nothing more than coconut and condensed milk and cocoa powder, and were quite revolting and tasted of sawdust.
Till she was sweet, met key of the door, and now we're hand in glove. Bingo!
Even if you didn't gamble, you didn't do these things, you played bingo at the seaside. A fun game, a lot of pleasure. And it's still there today in the establishments around the coast of this country. Hundreds and hundreds of bingo units.
For many people, fairground bingo is still very much part and parcel of the British seaside experience and has remained virtually unchanged over the years.
Oh yeah, we've always come to Blackpool ever since we were born, you know. I'm only 21 now, like, you know. But no, we've come to Blackpool for years and we've always come here into this little bingo place.
White 6 and 7, 67. White 7 and 9, 79.
Right, you pop your money in the slot, you get both your cards. Are you looking for a line down, across, diagonal, or one in each of your 4 corners? The caller calls the numbers. If you get a line, you either press your button or you shout house. You can then save your vouchers up for the bigger prizes, or you can just take a 1-win prize off the front of the store.
I've got a football money box and a cupcake money box. For my granddaughter, I've got these lollipops. For a frying pan, because I burnt the other one. So I've got...
For Katie, bingo is in the blood. The tradition has passed down through her family.
My grandparents were in the fairground business, travelling, came to Cleveley's to settle down and opened up amusement arcade and bingo. And my parents have worked there all my life, though, that's all I can remember. And then we came up to Blackpool and opened up here in 1984, and we've been here ever since.
Jimmy Thomas, also descended from a fairground family, would go on to become one of the country's leading bingo operators.
I started in the bingo business about 70 years ago. I was 8 years old, and I had a lovely job. I carried a basket of balls around a bingo, which the customer takes the ball, threw it into a box where there were numbers, and that selected the numbers.
Bingo lingo had a particularly practical use when it came to fairground and seaside bingo.
When you were on a fairground and you were playing bingo, sometimes it wasn't very busy. And the important thing was the skill of the man on the microphone to entertain. You were not just calling numbers, you were a performer. And so you wanted to slow it down, but still not bore them, but slow it down enough for more people to congregate round, ready for the next game.
Although extremely popular, the fairground bingo games were skirting around what was acceptable under British law back in the 1950s.
In a fairground, they're always played for prizes, never for money. That's why, if you like, it was tolerated. We called it prize bingo. Fairgrounds went to a town for 2 weeks. Local authorities took the decision on how to handle gambling, and they said, this is acceptable, it's fun, it's here for 2 weeks, it's a game of skill. And so they let it go.
In any case, the powers that be were far more preoccupied with a different type of gambling.
The big social scourge in that period was street betting. Everybody was worried about street betting. We don't like men loitering on street corners, placing bets. We don't like the people leaving work to go and place bets. Every single workplace had a bookies runner, so street betting needed sorting out.
Runaway rascals up against the law.
Big changes were on the horizon. The Conservative government at the time proposed to legalise street betting after setting up a committee to investigate the state of gambling.
When they were considering this new bill, they spent most of the time looking at street betting, about 80 odd hours, and they spent 3 hours looking at gaming, because the Home Office assured the MPs that were considering it that gaming would not be profitable.
So bingo definitely wasn't top of the Conservatives' agenda when they decided to go ahead with the 1960 Betting and Gaming Act. But by passing the bill, they legalised commercial bingo for the very first time.
Key of the door, 21.
It allowed gambling in licensed clubs with membership. Clubs were allowed to charge people an entrance fee, and that's how they got their money. And then 90% of that went back in prizes and 10% went to the government.
The Tories' intention was to bring bingo, something they regarded as a benign pastime, under control. But unwittingly, they had unleashed a whirlwind.
By January the 3rd, you've got the first bingo club, and by the end of January, you've got an explosion of bingo clubs.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain.
The doors flew open and bingo halls opened for business. Big business.
In the early 60s, the bingo boom was huge.
£100,000 a week is gambled in the big bingo clubs.
The Treasury did do a survey in 1963, during which they established there were 13,700,000 and something members of bingo clubs. So we're looking at a lot of bingo clubs.
Definitely.
Are you going to spend all your afternoons and evenings in here from now on?
Definitely. Wish we could do it every day, we'd love it.
By 1966, 24% of the population was playing bingo. So that's like almost a quarter of the population.
Oh, I bet you're excited about this, aren't you?
I'm so excited I could do with a drink of whiskey.
What is it, £47?
£47, 2 shillings.
If you want to. So you're going to sit through?
Oh, to the last session.
And again in the evening?
Oh, definitely.
Are you? You're a real addict now, are you?
No.
Straight balls of fire.
Few could have foreseen just how quickly commercial bingo would take hold. But while the government may have misjudged its potential, others most definitely hadn't. Just behind the scenes, a host of entrepreneurs had been waiting to cash in once the new law was passed. They were quick off the blocks, with one man in particular leading the pack.
Eric Morley was really the central figure in the explosion of commercial bingo.
Eric Morley was the driving force behind the Mecca organisation. By the 1950s, the company was a big player in the booming post-war leisure market, and their empire included dance halls, ice rinks, bowling alleys and picture houses. But by the 1960s, the cinema industry was in trouble.
In the last 10 years, box office takings have been halved, while the number of admissions has fallen even more. The number of cinemas open has followed the same pattern.
Cinema had once played a significant role in people's lives. Many went to the pictures several times a week, but the rise of television had enticed people back into their homes.
Suddenly people were staying at home to watch Julie Andrews on television or somebody. They didn't go to the cinema.
And with that collective experience gone, a big void had opened up, not just in people's lives, but in town centres up and down the country.
And cinema after cinema closed. Cinema has very little use. It's a large shed in the middle of a town with nothing in it.
This hit Mecca hard. Eric Morley, who'd run games in the army and who could see how big a draw it was in the holiday camps, knew that bingo was the answer.
You know, he was very astute. He knew what the people wanted, and he had his finger on the pulse of popular taste. He knew because of Butlins that bingo was popular. He knew he'd got these buildings, and he put two and two together, and he made a very, very successful 4 out of it.
Morley was so convinced by the power of bingo that Mecca immediately started an aggressive expansion programme, buying up empty cinemas all over the country at rock-bottom prices. But he wasn't the only one. The fairground families also seized the opportunity.
The showmen, with their knowledge of bingo, they'd been playing it on the fairgrounds for a long time, and their bit of finesse, their bit of skill at entertaining, they were showmen. They enjoyed showing. And they could then take the cinema, put the bingo into it. I remember actually building prize bingo units inside the cinema from the fairground, and actually building them up inside and then building the bingo around it. So, you know, we moved in. And with that knowledge, that bit of finesse of entertaining, they made a success of turning cinemas into bingo halls. Thousands of them.
In the monochrome world of early 60s Britain, the entrepreneurs managed to inject glamour back into the high street for ordinary people. And they topped off the appeal by adding special celebrity appearances to the mix.
Pat Phoenix, Elsie Tanner was on Coronation Street and used to come regularly to the bingo hall to present things for me.
Something that had once been just a holiday pastime was now available every day of the week. But the game had changed. The days of cheap and cheerful prizes were gone. People were now playing for big money. With membership numbers rocketing, the clubs were able to offer ever more seductive prizes.
They were glamorous places. The prizes were not just cash, the prizes were designed to be glamorous. So we had mink stoles, we had cruises in the Mediterranean, to Monte Carlo, for example, or Biarritz. So these are holidays that you would see the jet set having at this time.
The money prizes went up and up and up, and the bigger the cash prize, the bigger attraction to your premises. No question about it. Money was God, and therefore it dominated.
However, there was one casualty. In this new world of high stakes, bingo lingo no longer had a place.
5 and 9, 59. 7 and 6, 76.
Now, when you are playing for thousands of pounds, you can't make a mistake. So the numbers then had to be called precisely, clearly and correctly. So there was no argument that you had misled a number.
49. On its own, number 2.
So, if you like, money changed the way bingo was called. It's now a commercial game.
44. All the fours, 44.
As soon as the game turned commercial, the comic calls disappeared, never to return to the big bingo halls.
I think one of the misconceptions about bingo and the bingo caller is that people joke about, whereas what bingo players want is simply to hear the number very clearly, because that is crucial.
Bingo time!
But something of the language survived and continued to evolve in social clubs and seaside bingo.
1 and 6.
Top of the shop, 90.
We have bingo 7 nights a week, plus Sunday afternoon.
1 and 6. Sweet 16, hold your card, please.
Bingo has always been part and parcel a life, working man's life.
On its own, number 7.
I used to call bingo numbers out.
Doctor's orders, number 9.
Legs 11, that always gets a whistle or a tap on a glass.
Those wonderful legs, 11. Thank you, whistlers.
Then anyway up, 6 and 9, 69. Halfway there, 4 and 5, 45.
Shut that door, number 4. Dinky-doo, number 2. Deck of cards, 52. All the 3s, dirty. Kelly's Eye, number 1. 5 and 9, the Brighton line. Thank you.
Today they remain so deeply embedded in popular culture that it would be impossible to grow up in Britain and not know a single bingo call.
Getting plenty, number 20.
The same modernising forces that ditched the traditional calls in the 60s were also at work taking the game in other new commercial directions as more and more people were getting on board.
4 and 1, 41.
Bingo trains are an absolutely awesome phenomena. Obviously excursions were popular in the 1960s, both by coach and by train, but bingo trains really caught the public imagination. The numbers were called and announced down the tannoy system, and you had people wandering up and down to basically, if anybody shouted house, there was a person in each carriage who could check the numbers and make sure that, and they would go, for example, from London to Brighton, London to Margate, Manchester to Blackpool, anywhere where there's a seaside resort basically, and a population to take them to it.
2 and 8, 28.
The bingo explosion was not only a big money spinner for the main operators, it was also good news for a small Sunderland printing firm which produced the all-important bingo cards.
The 60s were a massive period for us. We went from 12 staff, 13 staff at the beginning of the 60s to at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, around 500. So we really, really grew. We were starting to print bingo at exactly the time when commercial bingo became legal. And we were one of effectively 2 major companies that were able to grow from that. All the collation was all done by hand, and the speed of people's hands and the work they had to do and the volumes that we were delivering were massive.
One of the reasons bingo took off as it did was because it was able to target the growing proportion of the population for whom the 60s were bringing new possibilities in the form of greater spending power. In 1962, the Guardian newspaper declared that a housewife's revolution had occurred after a government report had found that 1 in 3 married women were now working outside the home.
Women had a discretionary income that they could spend. Now, they had already found they liked gambling on bingo when they went on holidays. And look at this, we've got a bingo place opening up right in the centre of town. It's open in the afternoons. I've done my shift in the morning because a lot of women only work part-time. I can pop down the bingo for the afternoon before I go and collect the children from school at 4 o'clock.
Often they'd go from work to home, change, and then go to bingo. 2/3 of the people playing in those days were women.
Nobody knows how many bingo players there are, but it's not less than 6 million and probably nearer 10. Most of them are women. Most of them are regular. Many spend £5 a week on the game. For them, the bingo session takes the place of both the music hall and the church.
Women were also beginning to say, well, why can't I go out and have a bit of time on my own? You know, a lot of men, it's quite acceptable for them to go out to a football match, to go fishing, you know, do whatever. Whereas women were perhaps beginning to be a bit assertive and saying, well, what about me?
I think you always forget, probably the only safe environment for a woman to go on her own. She could go there without accompanied by a man, accompanied by another woman, and she felt totally safe. The husband was happy to give her a couple of quid to go with because he knew she was in a total safe environment. She got nobody getting drunk and chatting her up, put it crudely. You know, there was nothing like that in a bingo hall.
We sort of forget just how unliberated women were.
Yes, my husband's the boss, and I have 7 sons, and I'd like them to take after their father. And because he's the boss, I mean, I have to ask his consent if I can go out to see friends or...
You know, women didn't go into pubs. They did have to get permission to go out without their husbands. They did have to prioritise the childcare. Opportunities were very limited. Even now, some women won't feel comfortable walking into a pub on their own, whereas you can go to a bingo club on your own. And it's possibly, I can't think of many places where women would feel comfortable going on their own.
I used to go every Sunday night. I used to leave the kids at home with my husband, and yeah, that was my escapism, really.
I like coming because it's somewhere you can come on your own. Like if you go in a pub and you're a woman and you're on your own, and it's just you just don't do it. Where you can come here either with someone, with friends, with your partner, or on your own bod. So
yeah, and no men want to come as well, so it's really good.
It's a great day out. It's a social day out. You know, you go there and you meet a lot of friends. I'm a single girl, so I love to go because I've got a lot of friends there, and they care for you. It's a caring place.
But the sight of thousands of women queuing up for a flutter at bingo was more than many could bear back in the 60s. Almost as soon as the boom began, so too did the backlash. Some newspapers started denouncing bingo as a new and dangerous phenomenon. And columnists gleefully declared the birth of bingo orphans.
We have in the Times an editorial that headlined "This cretinous pastime." We have condemnation of the players as stupid, naive, ignorant.
Have you ever gambled away all your housekeeping money?
No, certainly not.
There were stories about women supposedly frittering away their housekeeping money. There were stories about women neglecting their children. And some of that was the kind of thing that is often levelled at women anyway.
The press reacted as you would expect them to. It was something they could sell papers on. If they find one child stood outside a bingo hall, they could have him on the front page. The fact the child was just passing the bingo hall didn't really matter.
The disdain wasn't just reserved for women. Bingo in general became a target of chattering class scorn.
Bingo. The most mindless ritual achieved in 500,000 years of human evolution.
There is a lot of snobbery around and quite a lot of hypocrisy and the usual elitism around anything that working class people enjoy.
How often do you come here?
Twice a week.
That's every week?
That's every week.
How much money do you spend here?
On the average, about 30 bob.
Have you got any children at home?
All married.
So you've got no family problems?
No family problems.
Wouldn't you rather be doing something else?
Such as?
Out, say, on an evening like this, walking, cycling, there are all sorts of...
It suits me down to the ground. I get this very wonderful entertainment here.
You know, whether it's greyhound racing or, you know, going down to the pub or the working men's club, those sorts of activities are seen as less educational, you know, they're less favoured.
The Theatre Royal, Margate, a fine 200-year-old house, the second oldest theatre in the country. But the queue I found outside wasn't waiting to see the play. They were waiting to play bingo.
Mr. Brown, are the bingo sessions helping the theatre much?
Well, they're not at the moment, but we're hoping during the winter period, when audiences are low, that they will.
This is a very old theatre. Do you think this is a very dignified way of helping it?
Well, it's not a dignified way, but it's a means to an end.
Isn't there a danger that it might turn into a bingo parlour rather than a theatre? How does your regular company feel about it?
Well, we have a member of the company here, Susan, that she would probably tell you more than I can. Miss Matthews.
Susan, you work in the box office, don't you, this afternoon?
Yes, on Sunday.
How do the actors feel about this bingo business?
Well, we don't like these
these posters put all round our beautiful old theatre, and to begin with we didn't like it at all, about taking the long view. If it means that we can have 12 months' work instead of just a seasonal period, then we're for it.
Susan wasn't alone. Many at the time felt that bingo was a threat to the world as they knew it. But for others, bingo was a welcome arrival to their world. Working class life was changing, with old patterns of living coming under threat for whole generations. Rows of terraced houses were being demolished to make way for new estates. And whilst this often improved the material quality of people's lives, the sense of community was faltering.
Whole streets were being restructured. The life of the street was very much changing. People were beginning to live in high-rise blocks of flats. Women would still go to the wash house in the 1950s and 60s to do their laundry. And a lot of those spaces were going. So the idea of having a communal life outside of the house, and remember that a lot of houses were not places that people actually socialised in. We've got this mythology really about working class life, that people are always popping in and out of each other's houses. That wasn't really the case. So to have a place that people could go out to and have a kind of non-intimate sociability, to be out with your mates, doing an activity together, bingo really fulfilled that.
So for the ordinary working people of this country, it was a godsend. The cinemas was closed. They needed a community action. There's no good sitting at home every night and talking to their neighbour. They wanted somewhere to go to meet their friends and have a night out. And a bingo hall became the place. Cheap, easy, friendly, great community atmosphere.
We've met poor people here in the last couple of sessions than we've met in the 2.5 years we've lived down here.
What satisfaction do you get out of this?
Oh, gives me a couple of hours out.
How much do you spend?
12 and 6 on the night.
That all? You think that's worth it for what you get?
Well, I've been a few times and I got £23 1 shilling, so my expenses are paid, aren't they?
For older women, there was that need, I guess, for sociability, to avoid loneliness. A lot of older women in particular live on their own. And in many ways, bingo was simply a way to get out of the house. And that's also why bingo sessions during the day are very popular. A lot of elderly people don't want to come out in the evenings.
Every Wednesday, about 12:15, I come round, open the hole, and then fill the urns with water ready and have it hot for when the players come in about 1 o'clock-ish, so they can all have a hot cup of tea if they wish. And then I do another duty, which is taking their entrance fees of 50p. Our basic average is about 30 to 32 every week. Sometimes it goes up to about 38, which is a good week. But I get excited when it gets past 25, because that covers all the expenses and give us a little profit, which is all going into the church funds.
79.79.
It's an escape from the boredom of life. They come for the companionship, somewhere to go, somewhere to get out of their little blocks of flats or apartments. Sometimes a slight break away from the family. And then they're all talking in over from table to table amongst themselves, and probably sometimes they wouldn't say 2 or 3 words right throughout the week to anyone else. But it's amazing how there's a jolly, friendly atmosphere.
It's the company. You meet people where you probably wouldn't have anybody to talk to. It's nice. Unfortunately, a lot of elderly people on their own, they don't have anybody to talk to, and when they do get a chance, well, like me, can't stop.
Bingo is now a staple of many church halls, but back in the 60s it was closely associated with other forms of gaming and helped trigger a wider moral panic about the extent of gambling in the UK.
There must be times when it seems to moralists as if Britain is a nation given over almost completely to gambling, the second oldest profession. A nation fiddling while the Treaty of Rome burns. But the Sabbath contrasts are too spectacular for comfort. In this Christian nation, only 1 person in 10 goes to church. God, who made us mighty, no longer makes us mightier yet.
Since the 1960 legislation liberalising betting and gaming, many now believe that Britain had become a nation of gamblers.
Britain was actually the destination of choice for anybody who wanted to gamble, because there was more opportunity to gamble within the UK than anywhere else in the world. So the spa towns of Europe were put in a shade by London. You know, if you wanted to come and gamble from America, then this was the place to be. And there was an awful lot of gambling tourism actually in that period, but mainly for the high-class casinos.
Some church groups were particularly unhappy about the rapid spread of gambling.
There's a lot of religious opposition. There's bodies that are opposed to gambling, the National Anti-Gambling League, because there's this great outrage against basically 2 or 3 things. One is that, in fact, it's a waste of money, causes poverty. Secondly, it corrupts children and women and children. And thirdly, the third real objection is it creates an attitude of getting something for nothing, some fun out. And those are the 3 driving forces behind trying to stop people gambling.
But the Catholics didn't have a problem with bingo. Instead, they saw it as an opportunity.
Made in Heaven, 67.
In the post-war years, there had been a huge influx of workers from Ireland to help rebuild the country. The Catholic Church needed money to pay for the building of new schools and social clubs to cater for them. Bingo provided an important income. It is said to have partly paid for the building that's become affectionately known as Paddy's Wigwam.
The Catholic Cathedral in Liverpool had been started before the war and to a very different plan. But of course, money was much tighter after the war. Building materials were rationed. So they had to have a new scheme, and they had to have a massive fundraising effort alongside the new scheme. So the Metropolitan Cathedral decided, well, if we're going to raise that sort of money quickly, you know, bingo games is one very good way forward. We will have bingo games, and they did, and very successfully too, because they raised a lot of money. And it's a very beautiful testament to the use of gambling money, I think, as well.
Even though bingo was doing positive things for the Catholic Church, political changes afoot in 1964 suddenly spelt an uncertain future for the commercial operators of the game. When Harold Wilson's Labour government came into power, it could see that things had got out of hand.
Control was not really in place. I had 5 casinos, small ones. Because I manufactured the equipment, I could put them in a club, became a casino. Until you open good casinos, bad casinos, too many of them. Uncontrolled, you could open anywhere. And you buy a cinema, you opened. It was freedom. When they're uncontrolled, you sometimes get a bad element in them. And bingo was virtually uncontrolled then.
Up to tricks, 46.
A few unscrupulous bingo halls were operating some sharp practices.
I still think the vast majority of bingo that was played with was safe and was done with the best intentions. There might have been 1 or 2 bad plays, but people were making so much money legitimately anyway, there wasn't much need to cheat the system. But there were 1 or 2 cheats. You know, you've got the caller reading out a different number from the ball.
Number 4.
They'd pull a ball and the ball might have number 3 on, they'd read number 17 because they wanted that ticket to win, and they probably have a list of numbers.
But the attractiveness of bingo had caught the attention of a far more dangerous fraternity.
Bingo, as it was constituted during this period, was a very, very good way of laundering money, because bingo players played cash. There wasn't a record kept of how many people came in or of how many cards you sold. If you won a large cash prize at bingo, or even had a large amount of money that you wanted to put in the bank, you could say, well, I won it at bingo. There was no check to say you didn't win it at bingo, so you know, there was nothing to stop you putting the proceeds of a heist in the bank under the guise that it was a bingo win.
Today's report shows that bingo clubs have a membership of 14.5 million members. Casino clubs close on 1 million, and that every year one-armed bandits make a profit of around £10 million.
One of the most lucrative opportunities for the organised crime gangs were the slot machines that were situated inside the bingo halls.
There was always a risk with the gaming machines that although they were run by family businesses in this country, of the foreign element creeping in because of the weakness of the Gambling Act. So we had got a potential problem. So where we were playing with machines that were pre-war, most of them, but the brand new machines were coming in, and the companies behind them were not the best of the syndicates in America. We won't get involved in what you call them, but they then shipped them over under their own banner and brought in their own people. They saw England as an easy touch, and they thought they could move in and take over the gambling business.
The gaming industry is a fast-moving industry with a lot of loose money and perhaps hot money involved, with a fringe of criminal element, with certain dangers of a social nature.
Fearing a mafia-style takeover, the Labour government was determined to tighten the rules and crack down on commercial gaming.
They actually meant it was going to end. It was going to be nothing left.
Bingo was seen as much a part of the gaming world as casinos, so Eric Morley and the other operators knew they had to lobby government to save their profitable industry.
And it was up to us to go and explain to government that bingo was not hard gambling that took away the people's livelihood. Bingo was soft and fun. And we had to explain this and persuade politicians there was a total barrier between the two.
They were successful because when Labour passed the Gaming Act in 1968, the casino industry was decimated and went from 2,000 clubs to 121, but bingo came out of it relatively unscathed.
The National Association of Bingo Clubs has come along with us in recognising that if bingo is to be this social game played, as I say, between neighbours for modest stakes, then we must have rules which ensure that it doesn't become a source of regret and sorrow and hardship. People want to go there and enjoy themselves and not feel that they've lost more money than they can afford.
So they softened for bingo because we persuaded them with evidence that bingo was a soft community game played by ordinary people.
Some controls were tightened up and licences became harder to come by, but the way was clear for the next decade.
Over 8 million people, mainly housewives and pensioners, play bingo perhaps once or twice a week. They wager on their clickety-clicks and their Kelly's eyes an incredible £185 million a year. The promoters called this obsession an entertainment with a flutter. Certainly it fills lonely hours for the elderly, but folk also want to win. Perhaps a few pounds only, or maybe up to 1,000.
And soon such amounts would pale into insignificance. The British tabloids that had once so derided bingo now wanted a slice of the action.
Fleet Street's first bingo millionaire phoned in his full house claim this morning.
They ran their own games and offered prize money that people previously could only have dreamt of.
This afternoon,
it began with the Daily Star, was quickly followed by the Sun, and soon after most of the rest of Fleet Street's mass circulation papers joined in. Millions of pounds are being offered in prizes in the biggest circulation war Fleet Street has seen for decades. The bingo games now reach 25 million newspaper buyers a day.
They're all bingo made.
We used to print the Daily Express bingo and the Daily Star bingo and the Mirror, and massive numbers. We were doing 5 million, 6 million run. At its boom, we were having many millions of players playing bingo in newspapers every day. We were having play rates for the national papers of about 30%. Now, what that means is we were dropping bingo tickets to every home in the country. And 30% of those tickets were being played. That's huge, absolutely huge.
The Sun newspaper claims that bingo has added 500,000 to its sales, proving a more potent circulation booster than its more familiar attractions.
Yes, it is cost effective, and hopefully we will also kill off some of our rivals in the process.
Do you really think it is going to end like that? Is this a battle to the death, as you described it?
It is a battle to the death, and our rivals are really feeling the pain.
So what do you think this means for the future of some newspapers in Fleet Street?
Well, I hope it means that some of our rivals are put out of business.
Even the broadsheets wanted in on the game.
It's a cross between the football pools and bingo. As befits the Times image, you get an upmarket plastic card the size of a credit card. The game is based on the ups and downs of the stock market.
Really, games for people like the Times and the Telegraph and whatever at the time were variations on bingo. Yeah, it wasn't bingo, it was either how a stock market moved or years of wine, but it was still bingo.
It does smack slightly of an upmarket bingo.
Well, if we're selling 4 million copies of the Times by this time next week, I would agree with you, yes.
The newspaper industry was delighted with the results, but traditional bingo operators weren't quite so enamoured.
It isn't bingo, it's a lottery. They draw so many numbers a day. You've got to buy the newspaper for a week. It's a sales gimmick to sell newspapers. They could play for big money because it's an advertising gimmick. But it's not bingo. There's no community atmosphere, there's no pleasure. It's purely a gamble.
The bingo clubs were worried. Momentum in the hall seemed to be slowing down. Overshadowed by the newspaper bingo millionaires, they needed to bring the buzz back.
Bingo was going to be left in the doldrums. We had the idea of the national game. The Bingo Association thought up this game.
They wanted to link up all the bingo clubs in the UK and consolidate ticket sales to create a massive prize fund.
We went across to Parliament and we pleaded with government. The Gaming Board threw up their objections. It was the Home Secretary at the time was Douglas Hurd, I can remember it well, and he said, no, let the bingo hall talk. He liked it, and he listened to the reasons, the sense, the logic of it, and said, this is great. These people have to compete. The people playing bingo have to have something to go for, a big prize.
In 1986, the national game was born.
I think people thought that we weren't serious, linking up 800 bingo clubs, national game by computer, and really there wasn't the technology, it was all new technology.
Computer-generated bingo tickets were sold in halls all over the country. A random generator selected that night's numbers, which were then transmitted across the network to all participating clubs.
This computer could take in and analyse all the tickets that were sold, know what numbers were called, and could check the winners and could control perfectly the running of this huge game with hundreds of thousands of tickets being sold from Scotland to Land's End.
But all the numbers are in now, so eyes down, national game, full house only.
And now your prize money went huge. £250,000, £500,000. Big money in those days.
Suddenly you had a legalised massive jackpot where you might get 80 or 100 grand for a single game of bingo, and it was just like, wow.
5 and 9, 59. Hand up, please. That's a good one.
Every night you got close and you had an equal chance of winning it as everybody else in the land playing that game. So it was a very popular game.
And it brought the spark back. One of the unique attractions of bingo is that it is not strictly a win-lose situation. The enjoyment of playing can be almost as much fun as the winning.
They enjoy the thrill of nearly winning. They enjoy the actual real thrill when they do win. They do enjoy seeing their friends as well while they're down there. They might go with a group, but you know, you're not sitting there to chatter, you're sitting there to play bingo.
For everybody that won, there was at least 50 people nearly winning. And the excitement was how close you got to winning. So that was the thrill of bingo.
I feel like shouting when someone shouts,
Yeah.
here, you're like, no,
Do you know what's worse? The one thing worse than that is when your one number is the next number out.
Yeah.
If it just wasn't the next, if it wasn't that next number that come out, I can live with that. But when it's the next number, oh my God, my heart goes in my stomach. It's like, couldn't you just missed it?
And so got the adrenaline going, got the excitement going, got the pleasure of it.
Oh, you're shaking all over, aren't you?
I keep willing it out and it won't come. And I call it a bugger.
If you have a win, you're delighted. If you don't, we'll say we'll try again next week.
You get terribly excited each
I get
game,
very
do you?
excited, yes.
Before each one?
Oh, we
builds
do,
up.
during the game. During and before we count, it's lovely.
And when they won, ecstasy, they'd made it.
4 and 6, 46. 7 and 3, 73. OK. Oh, we've got...
Did you win this afternoon?
I did, yes, twice.
I won £10. It's my first time winning as well, so it's dead exciting.
I've won nothing yet.
I've won 20 before, but that's about it. We're still waiting for the big win.
Did you enjoy the session?
Very much, thank you.
Did you win?
Yes, 10 shillings.
Whether they won £1 or they won 1,000 didn't really matter. They'd yell just as loud, they'd jump in their seats just as high.
Bingo, I've won. It might only be £4, but you've won. It's just, I don't know, it gives you a thrill. Well, it gives me a thrill anyway.
250 each.
When I win money here, I come in next day and spend a certain part of it and go to my bar and get me 2 bottles of Watney's Guinness.
People will go and say to you, I don't go to win, I go for the pleasure. I think they're fibbing. I think everybody wants to win. Whether it's bingo or whatever you do in life, you want to win.
The national game had brought bingo into the modern era, but the converted cinemas that had once provided glamour now looked shabby and out of step with the way people were living.
As the people became more used to travelling in cars, you opened bingo halls where you got the biggest car park. Cricklewood was a total success because it had car parking for 1,800 cars. We are now creating the large bingo halls, the 1,000-seater, 2,000-seater. People were more demanding now. They were asking for better facilities.
You've moved to much more upmarket buildings that are designed for bingo.
We could develop a bingo hall with entertainment round the outer core. We could put a pub, a restaurant, theatre, all these things around inside the huge shell that then put a couple of thousand seats in the middle of it. So they became the next generation of bingo halls.
When I walked in, I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, this is great, isn't it?
Everything matches everything, doesn't it? Everything matches
Beautiful,
everything.
Yeah.
Out of this world.
The minute you walked in the joint.
Big prize money and the new supersized, specially designed halls seem to have created a bright 21st century future for bingo. But then something came along that had the potential to extinguish this favourite British pastime for good. In 2006, the Scottish Assembly introduced a smoking ban, and the rest of Britain followed suit a year later.
Smoking is a very important thing to bingo players. 65–70% of people in bingo halls smoked. It's a nervous reaction when you're playing. You enjoy to smoke. It's part of the pleasure.
A higher proportion of working class people smoked. Bingo is a working class game. Bingo is also a game for people who take risks on occasions. So when the smoking ban came in, it hit bingo harder proportionately than other pastimes.
We'd reckoned that would take 15% away from the bottom line income of a bingo hall. For a lot of bingo halls, that meant closure.
Unfortunately, this is the club that we had to close. We shut this in May of last year. We used to have on a regular basis over 1,000 people playing in any evening at the Rail Bingo Club.
Nobody could deny it's a more pleasant place to be in the bingo hall now. Cleaner, tidier, there's not that stink of tobacco. You're talking to a non-smoker, so I'm probably biased. But it did hurt my business, and it hurt the bingo business. And we haven't fully recovered from that. But over time, it's adapted.
By 2010, there were nearly 30 million less players a year compared to 2006. But it still meant that around 48 million people were playing annually. Bingo is once again having to reinvent itself, this time for the smoke-free 21st century. Designing new clubs with something for everyone.
Bingo still has its fan base within the UK, and it's quite an extensive one. The game is trying to reinvent itself. It's targeting student nights out and hen nights.
And it appears to be working. Today, the biggest growth area in membership is women under 35.
It's more younger people now that come, especially at the weekend. We've got the lounge. It's good atmosphere. It really is now. It's a lot more for the younger people now. It's really fun.
Bingo's success in attracting a new clientele has been helped by the creation of separate spaces for those who want to socialise without disturbing the more hardcore player.
It's got a different vibe about it than everyone seems to think it's all for like grandmas and stuff, and it's really not. It's really good fun, and you get to have a drink and a laugh, and because you've got the loud room and the quiet room, you can sit in the loud room with your girlfriends and have a bit of a chit chat and have fun, and it's a good laugh really.
You know, the business is always cyclical. I think bingo's on an upturn now. There's still, you know, millions of people play the game now.
I remember people saying, you know, 25, 30 years ago, oh, bingo won't last. You know, it's still very strong these days. I don't think personally that there'll be a time when bingo isn't popular.
Nearly there, 89.
The bingo business has managed to survive because at the heart of it is a simple game that we fell in love with a long time ago. And its appeal today is much the same as it has always been. It's an egalitarian game, beautifully without pretense, that's kept us entertained through difficult times, injected a touch of glamour to the high street, and brought people together.
And we've made a lot of friends, haven't we? I didn't know Anna until I came to bingo, and then when this opened, we just came on a Friday, and we've been every Friday since.
It does play an important social function. I think it is important that that does continue.
1 in 7, 17.
I was sat with people 90 years old, sharp as needles. One of their daughters said to me, my mother was going into a home. Since she started playing bingo, her mind is fresh again. And that's what bingo does. It makes you work your brain.
And there's always that chance that you might just get a full house.
Bingo!
But whether you win or not, bingo is more than just a game. For many, it's part of who they are.
I don't want people crying at my funeral. I said, what I want is, as you walk in, you're handed a strip of bingo tickets, and I want the priest to call the bingo numbers so we can all have a game of bingo.
Just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How can you lose? The lights are much brighter there. You can't forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, so go downtown. No brighter place for sure, downtown. Everything's waiting